Revenge with Karen. The salt air usually clears my head, but today it smelled like burnt ambition and cheap cologne. I stood on the teak decking of the Ethelgard, a 40-meter vessel that was less a boat and more a floating master's thesis in maritime autonomy. My company, Thalassa Systems, had designed every circuit, every line of code, and every redundancy protocol that kept this thing breathing. I wasn't just the owner, I was its architect, who was currently running a diagnostic on the portside thruster arrays, because the telemetry had been showing a 0.4% variance in response time. And in my world, 0.4% is the difference between a perfect docking and a lawsuit. I was wearing my working gear, a pair of faded Navy coveralls I've had since my days terminating fiber optic cables in freezing shipyards in Norway, and a beanie that had seen better decades. No makeup, hair in a messy bun that screamed deadline mode rather than gala ready. To the untrained eye, I looked like I belonged in the bilge. To anyone who actually mattered in this industry, I looked like the person who signed the checks. Then I heard him. The thump of heavy footsteps on the gangway, followed by a voice that sounded like it had been dipped in trust fund money and dried with a lack of consequences. Jesus, it smells like diesel and desperation out here, the voice boomed. It was Brent the boy king, the 26-year-old son of the venture capital titan, whose firm held a significant, though minority, stake in my company. Brent, who thought equity was just a fancy word for allowance. He came bounding onto the aft deck, sunglasses worth more than my first car perched on his nose, holding a half-empty mimosa despite it being 8:30 in the morning. He stopped when he saw me kneeling by the access hatch, a tablet in my hand. Didn't look at my face. He looked at the coveralls. He looked at the grease smudge on my cheek. Hey, he snapped, snapping his fingers. You, cleaner, whatever. I didn't look up immediately. I finished the code injection on the tablet, watched the green verification light blink, and then slowly rose to my feet. Can I help you, Brent? He blinked, clearly not recognizing me. To him, I was just background texture, an NPC in the video game of his life. Oh, know my name? Good. Listen, the cleaning crew was supposed to be gone by 8. I have investors coming at noon. I need this deck spotless. And get me a fresh towel while you're at it. This humidity is making me sweat like a pig. He tossed a dirty rag he'd evidently picked up from a railing right at my chest. It hit me with a soft, wet thud and fell to the deck. Now, before I tell you how I disassembled this man's life, do me a quick favor. If you enjoy stories about corporate heirs getting absolutely wrecked by the people they underestimate, hit follow button. It fuels my cold, calculating heart. I looked at the rag. Then I looked at Brent. Get off the boat, cleaning ladies only. He shouted, laughing at his own wit as he turned to look at a blonde woman who had just boarded behind him. She giggled, a hollow sound that carried on the wind. Excuse me, I said, my voice dropping that octave that usually makes board members sit up straight. You heard me, Brent sneered, stepping closer, invading my personal space with the scent of stale champagne. I don't want the help hovering. Finish up the toilets or whatever you do and get off. The adults are talking. He gestured to the yacht as if he'd built it with his bare hands. This is a premium asset, sweetheart, not a break room for the janitorial staff. My heart didn't shatter. My feelings weren't hurt. Instead, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. It was the same feeling I get when I find a critical bug in a competitor's software. It wasn't anger, it was opportunity. I realized in that moment that Brent didn't know. He genuinely didn't know I owned the boat. He didn't know I owned the company that built the boat. He didn't even know who I was. His father, the chairman, handled the high-level strategy. Brent was just the brand ambassador, title we invented to keep him out of the server rooms. He had never bothered to attend the technical briefings. He had never looked at the org chart. He saw a middle-aged woman in coveralls, and his brain auto-completed maid. I could have fired him on the spot. I could have pulled up my bank account, or the title to the vessel, or called his father. But that would be too quick. That would be efficient, but it wouldn't be educational. And I believe deeply in education. Understood, I said, my face a mask of neutral obedience. I bent down, picked up the rag he'd thrown at me, and folded it neatly. I'll just finish my checks and be out of your hair. Yeah, you do that. He dismissed me, turning his back to take a selfie with the skyline. And try not to touch the upholstery on your way out. It's Italian leather. I walked toward the gangway, my tablet tucked under my arm. As I passed the main security console near the stern, I tapped a command sequence that didn't appear on the standard user interface. It was a ghost log, a subroutine that records audio and video from every sensor on the ship, storing it in a partition that only I could access. I was leaving the boat, physically, but digitally, I was embedding myself into the nervous system of the Ethel Guard. "Nice fit, babe," I heard him say to the blonde as I stepped onto the dock. "My dad practically gave me this boat. I run this whole harbor now." I stopped on the wood planks of the pier, looking back at the gleaming white hull of my creation. He thought he ran the harbor. He thought he owned the boat. He was about to learn that you don't insult the person who holds the remote control. I walked to my car, a sensible sedan parked between two Ferraris, and sat in the driver's seat. I opened my laptop and watched the live feed from the salon camera. Brent was already spilling his mimosa on the very Italian leather he'd warned me about. Let the games begin. To understand the depth of the grave Brent was digging for himself, you have to understand the paperwork. And I know paperwork sounds about as sexy as a root canal, but in my line of work, the fine print is where the bodies are buried. 6 months ago, Brent's father, Richard, sat across from me in a glass-walled conference room in Seattle. Richard is a shark. He's an old-school shark. He understands leverage. He wanted a flagship vessel to show off the VC firm's portfolio. He wanted the Ethelgard to be the face of their maritime investment division. Specifically, he wanted Brent to have a project. "He needs responsibility, Yvonne," Richard had said, looking tired. "He needs to feel like he's running something tangible, not just spreadsheets." "Iron, steel, water. You want me to give him my prototype?" I asked, sipping an espresso that cost more than my first hour of wages back in the day. "Not give," Richard corrected. "We structure it as a long-term lease for marketing purposes. He becomes the operating manager of the vessel for corporate events. It makes him look like a heavy hitter. It's good for the firm's image, and frankly, it keeps him out of the actual office where he breaks things." I had paused. I knew Brent. I knew he was a liability wrapped in a polo shirt, but I also knew that Thalassa Systems needed the VC firm's next round of funding to expand into the Asian market. "Fine," I said, "but the title stays with me. The insurance stays with me, and the systems administration, that stays with Thalassa. He gets user-level access. He can steer, he can plan parties, he can dock, but he doesn't touch the root code." Richard had waved his hand dismissively. "He doesn't know code from calligraphy, just wants to blow the horn and host cocktail parties. It's a deal." We signed the papers. The document was 80 pages long. Page 72, paragraph 4, subsection C, contained a clause I had inserted personally. It was the owner override protocol. It stated that in the event of misuse, safety violations, or reputational damage, legal owner me retained the right to assume immediate and total control of the vessel's navigation and operational systems, remotely or on-site, without prior notice. Richard didn't read page 72. He just wanted his son out of his hair. Brent definitely didn't read it. He just saw the shiny keys. Back in the present, I sat in my home office, a room lined with monitors that looked more like NASA mission control than a study, pulled up the legal scans. Brent thought the boat was a gift. He told everyone it was his personal yacht. He posted it on Instagram with captions like #selfmade and #bosslife. He didn't realize he was essentially driving a rental car where the landlord could kill the engine if he smoked inside. On my screen, the Ethelgard's internal systems were humming. I could see the fuel levels, the battery charge, the freshwater tank status. Thanks to the ghost log I initiated earlier, I could hear everything happening on the bridge. "Dad just doesn't get it." Brent's voice came through my speakers, crystal clear. He was pacing the bridge, talking to someone on speakerphone. "Yvonne is dead weight. She's old tech. Who cares about redundancy protocols? We need Flash. We need AI integration. We need to pivot." I leaned in. Pivot. The favorite word of people who have no idea where they're going. "I'm telling you." And Brent continued, presumably talking to one of his frat brothers who had failed upward into finance. "I'm going to push her out. The board loves me. The demo next week. I'm going to present a new vision, my vision. And once I show them how much money we're wasting on her safety standards, she's toast." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, so that was it. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a coup. He wasn't just treating me like a maid. He was actively plotting to remove me from the company I built from a garage startup into a global leader. He was going to use my boat, at my demo, to convince my investors that I was obsolete. I looked at the grant admin access button on my screen. I could lock him out right now. I could turn off the lights, lock the cabin doors, and blast polka music over the PA system until he cried. But that was reactive. That was emotional. Yvonne doesn't do emotional. Yvonne does strategic demolition. He wanted to present a new vision at the demo. Fine. I would make sure he had the most memorable demo of his life. I opened a terminal window and began typing. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was preparing the stage. If he wanted to play captain, I was going to let him. I was going to let him sail right into the middle of the ocean, metaphorically speaking, before I pulled the plug. I checked the guest list for the upcoming event. Top-tier tech bloggers, 2 senators, the entire board of directors. Perfect. The audience for his execution would be standing room only. Over the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own machine. I didn't step foot on the Ethelgard, but I lived there. Through the high-definition security cameras and the bridge microphones, I watched Brent turn my masterpiece of engineering into a floating fraternity house, hosted a pre-launch brunch that involved 3 crates of champagne, and a DJ who seemed to think bass was a substitute for talent. I watched as ash from his cigars drifted onto the teak, my hand-oiled teak. I watched as high heels dug into the soft decking. I logged every single infraction, not for insurance purposes, but for the moral dossier I was compiling. But the physical damage was nothing compared to the verbal garbage he was spewing. On Tuesday, brought a group of potential angel investors aboard. They were mostly kids in hoodies who had gotten lucky with crypto, looking for the next shiny thing. So, who handles the tech stack? One of them asked, pointing to the helm displays. This interface is slick. Oh, I supervised the whole UI overhaul, Brent lied, leaning back in the captain's chair with his feet up on the console. We had some legacy engineers, the old guard, who wanted to keep it clunky. Had to step in and streamline everything. The main engineer, Yvonne, she's basically a dinosaur, great for paperwork, but she doesn't get the user journey. I sat in my office, sipping green tea, my knuckles white, dinosaur. I wrote the kernel for that operating system in a basement while he was still learning not to eat paste. Later that afternoon, I had to physically go to the marina to sign off on a fuel delivery, regulatory requirement that needed the owner's signature. I wore a blazer this time, trying to look the part of the executive I was. Brent intercepted me on the dock. He was with a woman, not the blonde from before, a different one. This one was a brunette holding a Pomeranian. "Hey, you," he shouted. I stopped. "Hello, Brent, did you restock the bar? I told you specifically I needed the Japanese whiskey." "I'm not the provisioner, Brent," I said calmly. "I'm here for the fuel manifest." He rolled his eyes and turned to the brunette. "See what I mean? Impossible to get good help. You give them a job and they give you excuses." He turned back to me. "Just grab a napkin, will you? Someone spilled red wine in the salon, it's sticky." He held out a crumpled napkin he had in his pocket. The brunette looked at me, then at him, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Babe, I think she's fine," Brent interrupted. "Go on, chop chop. Have a sunset cruise to catch." I took the napkin. I actually took it. It felt like holding a live grenade. "I'll see to it," I said. My voice was so level it was almost robotic. I walked past him onto the boat. I went to the salon. There was indeed a wine stain on the cream carpet. I didn't clean it. Instead, I took a photo of it. Then I took a photo of the empty whiskey bottles scattered on the table. I took a photo of the confidential company documents he had left lying open on the sofa, documents detailing the Q3 projections. This was a security violation of the highest order. Leaving sensitive IP out in the open, that was grounds for immediate termination of his access privileges under corporate bylaws. But I didn't trigger the alarm. I just documented it. As I was leaving, I ran into one of the older investors, named Mr. Henderson. He had known me for 10 years. He looked at the napkin in my hand, then at the chaotic salon, then at me. "Yvonne," he said softly, I apologize for the atmosphere. Richard's boy is spirited. He's certainly that," I said. Are you letting this happen?" Henderson asked, his eyes shrewd. He knew me. He knew I didn't tolerate incompetence. I smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "I'm just letting the data accumulate, Arthur. I believe in a large sample size before making a decision." He nodded slowly. "I see. Well, I'll make sure to wear a life jacket to the demo on Friday." "You do that," I said, "and maybe stay near the gangway." I walked off the boat, tossing the napkin into the trash bin on the dock. The bin was labeled refuse. Fitting. Wednesday brought the rain, and with it, the dark clouds of corporate espionage. I wasn't at the marina. I was at Thalassa Systems HQ, glass monolith overlooking the gray waters of the Sound. My office is usually a sanctuary of silence, but today the air felt heavy. I had called in Sarah, a junior board member who I had mentored since she was an intern. She was sharp, loyal, and invisible to men like Brent. "It's worse than you think, Yvonne," Sarah said, sitting on the edge of the sofa, clutching her tablet like a shield. "Tell me," I said, staring out the window at the rain streaking the glass, circulating a memo to the entire board. "He's calling it Project Fresh Sale." I turned around. Project Fresh Sale sounds like a detergent. "It's a restructuring plan," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's claiming that your obsession with safety and redundancy is costing the company 15% in potential margins. He has charts, Yvonne. Fake charts. He's comparing our development cycle to app developers, not maritime engineering firms, saying we're too slow. We build ships that survive hurricanes," I said, my voice hardening. "Not dating apps that crash when too many people log on." "He doesn't care," Sarah continued. "He's lined up votes. The 2 new VC guys, they're with him. They want a quick exit. They want to pump the stock, slash the QA budget, and sell to the highest bidder next year. And the kicker, he wants to announce the leadership transition at the Friday demo." On the yacht, I felt a cold fire ignite in my stomach. He wasn't just going to push me out. He was going to do it on my vessel, in front of the press, framing it as a victory for modernization. He was going to stand on the deck I paid for, holding the microphone I bought, and tell the world that I was obsolete. "He's accusing you of failure to scale," Sarah whispered. "That's the legal term he's using to trigger the clause in your contract." "Failure to scale," I repeated. I walked over to my desk and picked up a model of the Ethelgard. "He thinks scale is just making things bigger and faster. He forgets that scale without stability is just a disaster waiting to happen." I looked at Sarah. "Does he know you're here?" "No, he thinks I'm ordering catering for the party." "Good, keep ordering. Make sure he has everything he wants." "Give him the rope, Sarah. Give him miles of it." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I sat down at my computer. I pulled up the system architecture for the Ethelgard. "I'm going to introduce him to a little concept called admin privileges." I spent the rest of the night in the server room. I wasn't writing a rebuttal memo. I wasn't calling lawyers. I was coding. I dug into the deepest layers of the yacht's operating system. I located the propulsion control module. I located the navigation lock. I located the environmental controls. Brent wanted to talk about speed. I was going to show him what happens when things stop. He wanted to talk about user experience. I was going to give him a user experience he would never forget. I found the file labeled Demo Mode.exe, the standard presentation preset we used for showing off the boat's features. I opened it. I rewrote the script. I didn't delete the old code. I just added a conditional loop, a trapdoor. If user equals guest admin Brent and location equals harbor coordinates, then execute protocol, dead water. I saved the file. I compiled the patch. I uploaded it to the yacht server via satellite link. On my screen, a small green bar loaded. 98%, 99%, 100%. Update complete, the screen flashed. Legally, I filed the update in our internal changelog as Critical Security Compliance Patch 4.2. The description read, "Enhanced remote intervention capabilities for unauthorized operator scenarios." It was the truth. It was the absolute legal truth. If Brent's team had bothered to read the technical changelogs, they would have seen it. But they didn't read, they just wanted to sail. I went home at 3 a.m. I slept like a baby. Thursday was the dress rehearsal, calm before the chaos. I arrived at the office late, fueled by espresso and vindication. My head of engineering, Marcus, was waiting for me. Marcus is a man of few words, a former Navy systems specialist who treats code with religious reverence. He knew what was happening. The rumor mill in a tech company travels faster than light. "The patch is live," Marcus said, not looking up from his soldering station. "Any glitches?" I asked. "None. Latency is 0. Override command is mapped to your personal key fob. We also routed a secondary trigger to your phone app, just in case." He finally looked up. "You know, if you do this, the PR fallout will be significant." "The PR fallout of letting a toddler steer the company into an iceberg would be worse," I replied. "True." Marcus cracked a rare smile. He called me this morning. Asked if we could install a party mode for the lights. Wanted them to pulse with the music. "You do it?" I told him it would require a hardware refit. But I did enable the external speakers to override the interior sound system. You know, for safety announcements. Good thinking, Marcus. So we're doing this? He asked, his voice low. I looked at the schematic of the Ethel Guard on the wall. We're not doing anything, Marcus. The system is just functioning as designed. If an unauthorized entity tries to hijack the vessel protects itself. That's not sabotage, that's a feature. I left the office early and drove to the marina one last time. The yacht was buzzing with activity. Caterers were loading crates of lobster. Florists were carrying arrangements that cost more than my mortgage. A banner was being strung up across the stern. Thalassa Systems, the future is now. Brent was on the bow, directing the placement of a portable stage. He was wearing a captain's hat, an actual, irony-free captain's hat. I walked up to the edge of the dock. I didn't board, I just stood there watching. Brent spotted me. He jogged over, looking flushed and manic. Yvonne, just the person I didn't want to see, he laughed, slapping me on the shoulder. Look, I know things have been tense, but tomorrow is going to be huge. Huge. And don't worry, I'll mention you in the speech. Thanks to the legacy team for laying the foundation, something like that. That's very generous of you, Brent, I said. Yeah, well, a generous guy. Hey, look, for the event tomorrow. Maybe you should just enjoy it from the shore. We're at capacity with the VIPs, and honestly, having the technical staff looming around kind of kills the vibe. You get it, right? He was uninviting me to the launch of my own ship. I get it, I said. Too technical, might bore people. Exactly, you're a genius, Yvonne, really. But backend. We need front-end energy tomorrow. Front-end energy, I repeated. Got it, cool. So take the day off. Go to a spa or something, treat yourself. On the company card. He winked and ran back to the stage, shouting at a caterer who had dropped a fork. I stood there for a moment, watching the water lap against the hull. The Ethel Guard bobbed gently, a sleeping giant. Sleep well, I whispered to the boat. Tomorrow we wake up. I reached into my pocket and touched the small, plastic key fob Marcus had given me. Looked like a garage door opener. It felt like Thor's hammer. I turned and walked away. I didn't go to a spa. I went home and laid out my outfit for tomorrow. Not coveralls, not a blazer. I chose a simple black turtleneck and dark jeans. Steve Jobs meets a cat burglar. I wanted to disappear until the moment I made everyone see me. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The script had been rewritten. All that was left was for the curtain to rise. Friday noon. The sun was high, the sky was a perfect, innocent blue, and the marina was swarming with the kind of people who use the word synergy unironically. I arrived 20 minutes after the start time. I parked my car at the far end of the lot and walked past the rows of luxury vehicles. I could hear the music before I saw the boat, a thumping, generic house beat that vibrated in your chest. The Ethel Guard looked magnificent, I had to admit. It was gleaming white, decked out in flags and banners. A red carpet led up the gangway. Security guards with earpieces checked names on iPads. I walked up to the checkpoint. The guard, a burly guy named Mike who I'd hired 3 years ago, looked at me, then at his list. Miss Yvonne, he said, lowering his voice. You're not on the list. I know, Mike, I said, keeping my face blank. Brent's oversight. I just need to check the aft cabling before they cast off. Safety protocol. Mike hesitated. He knew who signed his paycheck, but he also knew who was currently screaming into a microphone on the deck. 5 minutes, Mike said, stepping aside. Stay out of the camera angles. You're a gem, Mike. I slipped on board. The deck was crowded with beautiful people holding champagne flutes. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone. I weaved through the crowd, invisible in my black outfit. I was the shadow in their bright, shiny world. Found a spot near the rear winch controls, partially obscured by a stack of speakers. From here, I had a clear view of the makeshift stage on the upper deck. Brent was holding court. He had a microphone in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. He looked flushed, sweaty, and ecstatic. Welcome, everyone, he bellowed, his voice echoing off the neighboring hulls. Welcome to the future of Thalassa Systems. Applause rippled through the crowd. The 2 new board members were clapping the loudest, nodding like bobbleheads. For years, Brent continued, pacing the stage. This company has been great. But great is the enemy of legendary. We've been too safe, too slow, too focused on what can go wrong instead of what can go right. I watched the crowd. A few of the engineers in the back looked uncomfortable. They knew that focusing on what can go wrong is literally the job description when you're building autonomous vehicles. Today, Brent yelled, we are launching a new era. No more red tape, no more hesitation. We are untethering ourselves from the past. He pointed dramatically at the horizon. In a few minutes, we're going to take this beauty out for a spin. We're going to show you speed. We're going to show you agility. And we're going to show you who's really in charge. The crowd cheered. He was loving it. He was high on the fumes of his own ego. He looked down and saw me standing by the winch. For a second, his smile faltered, covered the mic with his hand, and hissed at a nearby assistant. I thought I told her to leave. Get security. He glared at me. I didn't look away. I just stared at him, my expression completely neutral. It was the stare of a scientist observing a lab rat running towards the cheese, unaware of the electric grid beneath its feet. A security guard started moving towards me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brent shouted, drawing attention back to himself. "Let's get this party started. Crew, prepare to cast off." He looked at me one last time, a smirk returning to his face. "Time to leave, sweetheart. The ship is sailing." "Yes," I murmured to myself, my hand closing around the fob in my pocket. "It certainly is." I stepped back onto the gangway, moving with purposeful slowness. The guard stopped, seeing I was leaving voluntarily. "Bye now." Brent laughed over the PA system. "Don't wait up." I walked down the ramp and onto the solid wood of the dock. I turned around. The crew began to untie the ropes. The thick hawsers splashed into the water. The ethel guard was free. Brent revved the engines. A plume of white water churned at the stern. The yacht began to drift away from the dock, the music pumping, the crowd cheering. I stood alone on the pier. The gap between the boat and the dock grew 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. "Goodbye, past," Brent screamed. I pulled the fob out of my pocket. It was a small, unassuming black rectangle with a single red button. "Hello, reality," I said, and I pressed the button. There is a specific physics to a 40-meter yacht leaving a dock. It's not like a car pulling out of a driveway. It's a massive displacement of water, a slow, majestic slide. The ethel guard moved with the heavy grace of a predator. I watched the gap widen, 30 feet, 40 feet. Brent was at the helm now, or at least, flybridge helm on the top deck, which was designed for show. He was spinning the wheel like he was in a movie, even though at this speed, the thrusters did all the work. He blasted the air horn, 3 short bursts. Illegal in a harbor unless you're in distress or backing up, but who cares about maritime law when you're a visionary? The guests were clinking glasses. The music switched to Don't Stop Believin'. The irony was almost too delicious. I checked my watch. 12:15 p.m., the perfect time for a disaster. I looked at the LED light on my key fob. It pulsed once, a steady green heartbeat. It was connected. The signal had handshake confirmation. The yacht was now about 50 yards out, turning slowly toward the channel exit. The press photographers on the shore were snapping pictures. This was the money shot, the young heir steering the ship into the future. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of diesel and salt. Now it also smelled of imminent justice. I didn't press the button immediately. I waited. I wanted them to be just far enough out that they couldn't throw a rope back, but close enough that everyone on shore could see exactly what was happening. I wanted them in the zone of helplessness. Brent was waving to the cameras on the shore. He looked like a king. He looked untouchable. "Look at her go." I heard him yell over the music. "Full throttle in 3, 2. Push the throttle levers forward." That was my cue. I pressed the button. I didn't just tap it. I held it down for a full second, feeling the tactile click of the switch. Instantly, the logic command was sent. It traveled from my hand through the encrypted radio frequency to the receiver on the mast of the ethel guard, down through the fiber optic nervous system, and straight into the engine control unit. Command received, dead water. Priority, alpha. Override all user inputs. Action, immediate shutdown. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a crash. It was something far more terrifying for a sailor. It was silence. The roar of the twin diesel engines cut out instantly. The churning white water at the stern went flat. The vibration that hummed through the deck plates vanished. But I didn't stop there. The dead water protocol was comprehensive. The music died. The party mode lights went black. The radar stopped spinning. Even the electric sliding doors froze in place. The ethel guard became a 40-ton cork bobbing in the harbor. On the bridge, I saw Brent lurch forward as the momentum shifted. He slammed the throttles forward again. Nothing. He pulled them back. Nothing. He started banging on the dashboard. The music had stopped, so the sound of his confusion carried across the water. "What the hell? Hey, why did the music stop? Get the generator back online." The yacht drifted. It had forward momentum, but no steering. It began to list slightly to the port side as the stabilizer fins locked in the neutral position. A few guests looked around, confused. "Is this part of the show?" Someone shouted. I stood on the dock, arms crossed, the fob hidden in my hand. I wasn't smiling. I was observing. The boat was drifting lazily toward a mud bank on the far side of the channel. It wasn't dangerous, not life-threateningly so, it was humiliatingly uncontrolled. Engine room, report. Brent screamed into the intercom, but the intercom was dead. I had disabled that too. He was screaming into a piece of plastic. He was the captain of nothing. And then the panic set in. Panic on a luxury yacht doesn't look like panic on the Titanic. There's no screaming about icebergs. It's a slow, dawning realization of inconvenience that curdle into fear. First, the air conditioning stopped. In the middays, the glass-enclosed salon began to heat up immediately. Then, the realization that the toilets wouldn't flush, vacuum pumps disabled. Then, the realization that the champagne fridge was warming up. But on the bridge, the fear was primal. I pulled out my phone and opened the Ghost log app. I needed to hear this. It's dead. Everything is dead. The captain, the actual captain, a hired hand named Steve who Brent had pushed aside, was yelling. I have no steering. I have no comms. Rudder is locked at 5 degrees port. Fix it. Brent shrieked. Reboot it, do the thing, the Control-Alt-Delete, I can't. Steve yelled back, the system is locked out. It says admin override active. Who has admin access? I do. Brent yelled, I'm the admin. It's not accepting your code, sir. It says user unauthorized. User unauthorized. 2 beautiful words. The yacht was now drifting sideways, presenting its broadside to the waiting press corps. Looked like a dead whale. I saw the guests starting to crowd the rails. They were pointing at the shore, pointing at the water. The illusion of the high-speed future had shattered. Now they were just rich people stuck on a hot barge. Brent ran out to the deck railing. He looked wild. He pulled out his phone. I saw him dialing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Incoming call, Brent asshole. I let it ring. He dialed again. I let it ring. He looked at the phone, shook it, then looked at the shore. He scanned the crowd, and then he saw me. I hadn't moved. I was the only person on the dock who wasn't taking a picture. I was standing perfectly still, looking straight at him. He squinted, then his eyes went wide. He pointed at me. You, he screamed. The sound barely carried over the water, but I read his lips. I raised my hand. I held up the black key fob. I saw him freeze. He understood. Finally, in his lizard brain, connection was made. The cleaning lady, the tech dinosaur, the woman he had kicked off her own boat. He started screaming at the people around him, pointing at me. She did it. It's her. She sabotaged us. Arrest her. But no one was looking at me. They were looking at the boat that was slowly rotating in the current. I tapped my earpiece phone. I dialed the harbor master's public frequency, which was blasting over the marina's loudspeakers for the event. Harbor control. Voice crackled. This is Yvonne Vance, I said, my voice calm and authoritative. Owner of the vessel Ethelgard. I am declaring a navigation hazard in Sector 4. Miss Vance, we have the vessel in sight. It appears dead in the water. That is correct, I said. The vessel has been remotely disabled due to unauthorized operation by unqualified personnel. I am requesting a tow tug for retrieval. Copy that, Miss Vance. Dispatching tugs. The announcement boomed over the marina. Everyone heard it. The press heard it. The investors on the boat heard it. Unauthorized operation. Unqualified personnel. I watched Brent slump against the railing. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a toy he was told not to touch. The Ethelgard drifted silently, a monument to his failure. It was time to finish this. The press loves a disaster, but they love a scoop even more. As the tugboats chugged out to retrieve the lifeless yacht, reporters turned their cameras away from the water and toward me. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked over to the podium that had been set up for Brent's post-sale celebration. The microphone was still live. I stepped up to the mic. Feedback whined for a second, then cleared. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. My voice was steady, magnified across the harbor. I apologize for the interruption to your afternoon. The cameras flashed. 100 lenses focused on the woman in the black turtleneck. There has been some confusion regarding the leadership and direction of Thalassa Systems, I said. Today was billed as a launch of a new era. And in a way, it is. I pulled out my tablet and connected it to the large display screen behind me. The man currently drifting in the bay, I pointed behind me, where the Ethelgard was being ignobly towed by a rusty tugboat. Believed that innovation means ignoring the foundation. He believed that safety protocols were red tape and that experience was obsolete. I tapped the screen. The ghost log data appeared, the audio of Brent calling me a cleaning lady, the video of him spilling whiskey on the console, the documents proving his plan to oust me based on fake data. The crowd gasped. It was brutal. It was raw. It was undeniable. Maritime engineering is not a game, I continued, my voice hardening. The ocean does not care about your stock price. It does not care about your Instagram following. It cares about competence. And when you remove competence from the equation, you get that. I gestured to the dead ship. I designed that vessel. I own that vessel. And today, I demonstrated a new security feature, the incompetence lockout. If the system detects an operator who poses a risk to the ship or the company, it shuts down. Today, system worked perfectly. I looked directly into the news camera. To the board of directors currently sweating on that deck, you have a choice. You can back the visionary who forgot to check if he had admin access, or you can back the engineer who holds the keys. I held up the fob one last time. I'll be in my office. We have work to do. I dropped the mic. Literally, it made a satisfying thud. I walked away. I didn't look back at the boat. I didn't look at Brent. I later heard was crying as the tugboat hauled him in. The aftermath was swift. By the time the Ethelgard was docked, the video of my speech had gone viral. The incompetence lockout was trending on Twitter. Brent's father, Richard, called me at 6 p.m. You embarrassed the firm, he said, his voice icy. Your son embarrassed the firm, I corrected. I saved the asset. He's my son. And Thalassa is my company. If you want to keep your shares, Richard, Brent is out, effective immediately. And you resign as chairman. There was a long silence. Then a sigh, send over the papers. Brent was escorted off the premises by the same security guard, Mike, who had let me in. He left through a side gate, soaked in sweat, his reputation in tatters. He's currently trying to start a crypto podcast. It has 12 listeners. I'm back at the helm. The Ethelgard is currently undergoing a deep clean. Getting the stain of mediocrity out of the carpets takes time, but the system is secure. The course is set. And the captain, she's right where she belongs.
Some lessons only show up after the emails stop and the lights go out. This one was worth staying late for. Thanks for sharing the moment with me. See you in the next story.